And it was almost, how do you take the design thinking and bring it into Agile? Because to me, a lot of pushback I get is, if we do design thinking workshops, it almost creates a blank space before you can actually do Agile. And, it's not as Agile, basically. It almost forces a waterfall.
Mm-hmm.
What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I think that's one of the things that I've experienced. Many people are turned off by design thinking workshops. So you have all of this momentum, everyone's excited, we have these great ideas, and then it's like, what's happening next? And it's very hard to have this transition from here's this great experience you have to where's my product.
Mm-hmm.
And the transition for me is the documentation. So in all the trainings, I always tell people, if your workshop has no documentation, it's a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to figure out if you have a good moderator, just ask him and show me your documentation. And if the only thing you get back is like a PowerPoint slide with a few people standing in front of the post-its doing this kind, ask back your money.
Yeah.
And if you have a rigid documentation, and documentation means for me, every post-it has a value because behind every post-it is an idea. The one big problem is on the post-it, people will just say like, improve organizational speed. So what does that mean? Nothing. Yeah? The interesting thing is always the conversation around the artifact that's shared. So someone comes and says, increase organizational speed. And in the workshop, I will be asking the person, what do you mean with that? He's going to tell a story. I'll document this story. I'll just type it into my computer. And that's the interesting thing. When you have all of this information, it's like each post-it is almost like a requirement. So the way I do my documentation is, if you have 200 post-its, well, you're going to have 200 individual statements. Here's the post-it. This is what the person said. And next to that, I will have a column. Is it in scope? Yes, no. Is it relevant for the project? Yes or no. So when I hand it over to the team, they can actually go through all of that and tick box, do I want to have it or not? So my goal is to make a transition from everything that happened into a workshop to each statement is a potential requirement and hand it over to the development team to look through all of that with the project or product owner and make a decision, is it important or not?
Mm-hmm. And then you would potentially, other designers or product designers would explore further, right, of how to add that?
Yes, depends on the size of the project. So if it's a small project, then I'll go into the next step. I'll also do some prototyping or even do some specification. For me, in the end, and not all of the projects are so, but if it's a project where you're going to have a UI, I'll build a prototype. And then for me, the important thing is I want to have a specification where I get end users in the room. So I don't want the managers in the room. I want the end users that then go through the prototype and confirm this is what we want to have. That's my ultimate goal. And if that's okay, then I would hand it over to the product team. And in a perfect situation, I'll spend a day with the product team and explain them this was the workshop. Here's the prototype, and then we're going to walk through all the use cases. Did you understand? Do you have some comments? And then maybe also important for me is I don't think one single person is the smartest in the universe. That means it's like always a suggestion. So if I make a prototype, I hand it over to the team. Like this is the minimum standard. That's what I came up with. But if you can improve it, please do it. Yeah. Before you do it, just have a conversation with me.
And how do you take it afterwards? Let's say if we would, about peripherals of actual workshop, do you send out the documentation to everyone? Like, what's your usually approach? Because you said before about prototyping, if you need to, informing your development teams. But how do you communicate with the team, which you just leave off, what happened in a workshop, let's say?
Well, I think it's also always a part of the workshop. At the end, closing the workshop, is to tell the people what the next thing is. Because what people want to know, like, okay, we had these great ideas. Let's say in the workshop, you make a project plan. And what I like to do is, for example, say, what are you going to do in the next 30, 60, and 90 days? So I always try to drive people to actually do something. And then it's important for the people that they can check out, like, okay, I participated in the workshop and no one's asking anything from me. Or I participated in the workshop, but because I'm the data administrator, the thing we need to do in the next step is have a conversation to map your database, and we're going to be contacted by somebody. It's important that people can just understand, is it done?
Mm-hmm.
But also I think there should always be a communication, but that's a decision from the workshop owner to tell them, like, okay, we're going to have a core team, we're going to evaluate this, we're going to go to management, we're going to pitch the solution, and this might be March 1st, and you're going to get an answer from that. People want to know in the end of the day, I invested my time, is there anything else I need to do? But also they want to ultimately have the answer.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have the workshop and you never hear something, and after 6 months you meet someone, hey Joe, we had this workshop, did something happen? I don't know. That's really bad. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
But the responsibility is always to the workshop owner. And I also don't believe in sending stuff out to anyone. So for me, there should always be a central point. So do the documentation, hand it over to the workshop owner. He also has the responsibility to actually look into it, if that's okay. And if he wants, he can distribute it with whoever he thinks is the correct recipient of that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes this information could be confidential, what's inside. Maybe it could be controversial. Maybe people talking about reforming the organization. He always has the last veto. I will never send anything directly to any of the participants.